First, we're gonna go with the hind quarter. Right here at the tendon, at the joint, you wanna cut the tendons off. You gotta have your blade always going away from you, not towards you. Safety is number one. Same thing here. And right at the joint, you want to break it. That goes on the bone pile. Now you want to remove all the stuff that you don't want. We don't like the deer fat, so we want to remove all the fat. And if you see anything that's kind of bloody, you want to move it now because it gets harder later. And when you throw away bloody parts, be generous because you don't want to ruin a perfectly good meat. Just trying to save a little bit of meat. That's not really worth it. You want to make sure the meat is really good and tasty. Now, this fiber tissues right here, if you can, you want to remove it now because that's what makes the meat tough. And you want to have it really done well so when your wife cooks it, she doesn't have to work so hard and she could really appreciate you hunting. And she won't be complaining when you're buying new guns. Imagine this right here is the knee, down here is the shank. So I usually like to do it easy, just go right at the bend, at the angle, just go right through it. And in the front, you're gonna find the little knee joint, put that in there. And just put the edge of the knife in there and just go straight through. Just like that, there you go. Now this is the shank with the bone, I'm gonna do that later. Let's stay with the main hind quarter. Now, if you look at it, this big ham right here is sectioned into different muscles. So you want to separate different muscles. That way, when you cut it into different cuts, you could actually cut the meat against the grain so that it be more tender. And if you could literally just separate it just like that. I have a GoPro on my head and honestly I really can't see myself, so I'm just hoping this is filming well. Okay, and you want to separate this meat right here, so put that aside. And even here, when you see this tough fiber tissue, you want to cut it at this time. Just remove that. You might lose just a little bit of the meat. Not a big deal. It's better to have really good meat than try to save a little bit of meat. So put that aside. Now even here, if you look at it, that's a gland. You don't want glands in there. That's gonna make the meat taste really bad. So Make sure you remove all the glands, all the lymph nodes. Now if you look at it, this right here is part of a shank, so you want to cut that out. And put this with a shank. As I mentioned, if you see anything that's kind of bloody, you want to just remove it this time. Now this little piece of meat like hanging here, that goes into multi-purpose meat. You want to separate the meat. There's a nice chunk over here. Multi-purpose. Now this right here is one big piece. So at this time what you want to do is you want to go right to the bone, and then you want to go put the blade right against the bone, and you can kind of peel it off. Make sure you don't cut yourself. Cut it right here, go straight down, go on the bone. Same thing on this side. Just roll the bone off. There you go. Oh, that's a really nice round steak right there. And the meat's on the bone, you could just cut it and put it on the pie of multi-purpose. You could, as I mentioned, you could grind it, or you could make stews, you could make whatever you want. Now I like to leave a little bit of meat on the bone, so when we make a bone broth, this meat actually makes it taste a lot better. So that goes there. Again, this goes into multi-purpose pile there. I separate this. You don't want any blood in your meat. That's what makes it gamey. Take all the fats out. Okay, so that goes on the big chunk there. Multi-purpose here. That's the shank. Now with the shank, now you want to leave these tendons with the bone, so when you make a bone broth, that tendon is what makes it to be really good and healthy actually. So just cut the meat right off the bone. You don't have to worry about cutting into different cuts, because this shank's gonna go into a big pile, into a slow cooking pot. Okay, that's the bone, that's the shank, and that's it. Okay, let's start with the steaks. Now you could see the muscle. You have a muscle grain going this direction, so you want to cut it against the grain. And if you cut it into 1 inch thickness, you have great steaks, a lot of steaks.